Welcome to The Explainer. So, what if one of the largest networks in the world wasn't some big corporation, but more like an invisible empire that's been operating right under our noses? Well, a massive 6-year investigation now claims to have put it on the map for the very first time. Okay, so let's start with what they say. The RSS, that's the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, officially presents itself as this pretty modest cultural organization. Their public line for years has been that they've only got about, 36 affiliate groups. But get this. A new report from Caravan Magazine and the Surrey Research Institute, they're alleging the real number is actually over 2,500. Yeah, that's not just a little off. It's a huge difference. It completely changes how you think about the scale of this organization. So how on earth did they get to that number, right? It wasn't just pulled out of thin air. Let's dive into the investigation itself. And this was a serious undertaking. We're talking about a 6-year project. The team was just meticulously poring over documents, not just from the RSS, but from all these alleged affiliates. They built this huge database and used 34 different criteria to figure out if a real connection existed. And here's the kicker. The report's big claim is that this isn't some loose family of groups, the Sangh Parivar, as it's often called. Nope, they're arguing it's a really tightly networked, centrally controlled global operation. And maybe the most important part, it seems designed for maximum influence, with the absolute minimum of accountability. Okay, let's start looking at the map, because when you start to visualize these connections, the scale is just staggering. Seriously. The investigation reveals a network with a truly global footprint. We're talking about a reach that could rival a lot of big multinational corporations. Now, the vast majority, as you might expect, are based in India. We're talking over 2,200 organizations. That's the core, the heart of this sprawling network. But, and this is what's so fascinating, it stretches way beyond India. The investigation found 107 affiliated organizations just in the United States. And then you've got dozens more in places like Australia, the UK, and Canada. And if we zoom back into India, the breakdown is really revealing. Okay, big numbers in states like Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra, that kind of makes sense. But the real surprise? Kerala. The researchers found 212 organizations there. And that's in a state where the RSS's political arms have always had a tough time getting any real traction. So this brings up a huge question, right? How can a network this big, this widespread, still claim to be so small and informal? Well, according to the report, that's the whole point. It's designed that way. The key, according to this research, is a strategy called plausible deniability. It's a structure that basically lets the central organization, the RSS, wash its hands of anything controversial an affiliate does. They can just say, hey, that's not us. And here's how this model allegedly works. It's a step-by-step process. First, the RSS trains these dedicated, full-time workers called pracharaks. Then, these pracharaks are sent out to set up what look like totally independent organizations. This creates a kind of firewall, you see. So if one of these groups stirs up controversy, the main RSS can just say, nope, no connection to us, all while supposedly pulling the ideological strings from behind the scenes. And you know what makes this whole network so tough to track? It's that a lot of these affiliates don't even look political on the surface. They're running as, service providers, publishing houses, even cow shelters. They aren't always shouting about Hindutva from the rooftops. Instead, they just quietly build legitimacy and, move money around. This whole thing about being opaque, it gets really interesting when you look at public records. Take the US, for example. The RSS has publicly said, we only operate in India, we don't hire lobbyists in America. But U.S. Lobbying Disclosure Act filings show a firm was paid more than $300,000 in just 9 months to lobby specifically on behalf of the RSS. So that's a direct contradiction. And this strategy, this whole system of being hard to see and easy to deny, it brings us right to the heart of the controversy that experts are pointing to, the question of accountability. Critics who are cited in the source material, they argue that the network's whole point is to push an ideology that really clashes with modern constitutional values, things like equality. They point to a total lack of financial transparency and a structure that just seems perfectly designed to dodge any kind of legal or public responsibility. Which leads us to this massive paradox, right? On paper, officially, you have an organization with zero formal accountability. It's not registered, it has no declared members, and it claims to not even have a bank account. But the reality, as this report alleges, is a huge, centrally run network with incredible influence and access to tons of money. One speaker quoted in the source material puts it pretty bluntly. They frame the ideology as basically an evolution of those far-right European movements from the early 20th century. But they argue this organization has made innovations to its structure, new ways of operating, to make sure it lasts and is much harder to take down than those older versions. So at the end of the day, this whole investigation leaves us with a really big question. And it's not just a question for India, it's for the whole world. When a network is this vast, this influential, but it has no formal registration, no real accountability, who is ultimately responsible for what it does? Thanks for joining this explainer.